same without Bree, Chris.
Hey, good evening, Guam. Welcome to the KUAM News D18 after party, where we do what we do here. Political commentary, punditry at its best. And I will introduce our panelists tonight from the University of Guam. Dr. McNinch, she's our House Political Analyst. From the Guam Young Professionals, Mr. Mars Johnson, thanks for coming back. And from the Grand Old Party, Kate Baltazar, good evening.
Off a day. Good evening, Chris.
So, pretty diverse couple of candidates tonight, Will Castro and Lacia Casil. What I really liked, though, was the tone and the dialogue from both them was, very optimistic.
I agree. I think that this was a great mix pairing. They both are really positive, really, charming. They have a lot of energy and spirit. And that's great. You want that. You want that in candidates. You want to see that they have the energy and passion. And really, it seems. I mean, obviously, Will has the edge. He's an incumbent, so he's kind of seen behind the curtains. And but I think that helps. And the fact that he's still positive and still has all these great other wonderful things coming up is wonderful. Your
impression, Mars, of the two?
Yeah, I like him for the most part, though. But one of the things that I've been looking for, especially the Guam Young Professionals has been looking for, is people with specific ideas and what they want to do.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Lacia Casil, I really like because she definitely has a specific goal in mind of what she wants to do, though. I mean, she's very interested in real property rights on Guam, though, and land use on Guam. Will Castro, though, to me, it seems more like he's just interested in being a career politician, though. And it seems like that's what he's always wanted to do, but I'm not sure exactly what he plans on doing. I'm not exactly sure what he did the last 2 years, too, though. So that's the difference that I would see between the two candidates from that perspective.
And, Lacia, when you talk about land rights, they just had a victory in Pago Bay. And, she's one of a few of the Democrat candidates who really focus on, land use and just land issues in general. She brought up the Chamorro Land Trust Commission and, a pretty hot topic lately. I thought that was a good call on her part.
Yeah, that's a really hot topic right now, though. It's interesting to see what's going on with that right now, though.
I think it's admirable, but I think that land is really a hot button topic right now, and kind of aligning yourself with that it could be risky. It could go both ways.
Right. I mean, how many land senators do we need?
Dr. McNinch?
You know what I mean, Dr. McNinch? I mean, that's the thing about, if you're a one-issue candidate, you don't want it to be the same one issue as like 5-6 other people.
Sure.
Right.
I think both of the candidates tonight were very, very good. I've known Will for 22 years. He was a student regent at the university when I first went to the university. He's got a very good graduate education. He is a genuinely good person. He is a career politician. I don't find anything wrong with career politicians as long as they're competent career politicians. And he's pretty competent. He knows how to get things done. He's paid his dues. He's worked hard to get to that office. I think it's great that he's an incumbent. I think he's going to do well in this election. I think he's going to do just fine. On Lacia, I really feel very strongly that she will do well in this election. I think that she brings a whole dimension about tolerance and respect. I think that our community needs to reflect on tolerance and respect. I think that we need to understand we're a diverse community. We have lots of people of all different kinds here, and it's hard for us sometimes to, as a society, accept people who are different than us, and this is an emerging area in socially and culturally. In terms of the land issue, I think that's a good, solid issue, but I think every candidate has what they really want to do in office, and I always call it the great unfinished work. Everybody who gets in elected office, before they get in elective office, and then when they're out of elective office, they had stuff they wanted to do when they got into elective office they were never able to do because they didn't know how. And then at the end, when they were out of office, then suddenly they realized, well, if I could have just done this or that, I could have gotten this done.
Hindsight.
Hindsight is absolutely more than 2020. And so certainly all new candidates need to remember that. They need to have the right guidance along the way. And the problem is it doesn't matter who's in the legislature. That group of 15 have to work together. You have to get 8 together to do anything in the legislature. And the scary thing is it only takes 10 to be basically a parliament in the Guam system. That's the scary part.
That is.
10 people can collude and do anything above the head of the governor. And that's not very many in relative terms. So yeah, it's I was very pleased with both candidates tonight. I think both very, very possibly and likely will get elected. I think it's going to be an interesting race.
You know, Kate, because Will's now a Republican, I'd like to ask you, you know, about what Mar said. Career politician, I mean, to those who are involved in the political scene, you know, whether they're staffers, senatorial, or just otherwise political people in the media, they do tend to say that about Will, that, you know, it's a lot of packaging, and he does kind of give off that politician vibe. But do you think that really matters if at the end of the day he's getting stuff done, and is he getting stuff done?
Absolutely not. I mean, to me, you work hard in silence and you let your progress and your accomplishments make the noise. I think that, you know, Will is really polished and generally a really well spoken and articulate person. So I could see how people could say, well, you know, he's kind of gaming up all the time. You know, he's kind of packaged to be this career politician. But as Dr. McNinch said, if there are issues in the community and you go into office thinking you're going to target these things, but there's a louder outcry from the people, there is absolutely nothing wrong with still continuing to serve. You know, if you look at his Marine Conservation Act and just different aspects of society, his first bill that he passed had to do with coastal communities and empowering coastal communities in Umatic, for example. Marine conservation, he's done quite a few things, done roundtables on drone, on public safety. He's done so many things. He does his mobile office, you know, out and goes out into the community to get these kind of the feel of what's the pulse in every community, because every village is different.
Right.
And so to me, garnering that kind of feedback and then translating it in ways, for example, he has his e-commerce bill that's coming out. He's done a lot of things with the Marianas Working Group, Coral Reef Task Force, a lot of regional partnership things that have not been done before. So in my mind, you know, call a spade, but if that spade is working, you know, he deserves it. He
So
deserves
what do
it.
you think is a good way to measure a senator's success? Because I know that Will does get himself out there a lot, but in terms of actual bills passed, he's near the bottom.
Well, in a minority, in a partisan system, it's difficult, and that's no secret. You know, if you're in the minority, it's going to be infinitely harder to get bills passed. But that doesn't mean you can't do good work.
Right.
That doesn't mean you can't bring people together and get their issues on the forefront to other senators who are in the majority and support them, because it's all about collaboration anyway. You know, at the end of the day, compromise and collaboration, and I think Will brings that. You know, he's a hybrid candidate. He is running as a Republican, but has very strong inroads and roots in the Democrat Party, and is embraced by both. And to me, he embodies a lot of those conservative ideals, but is socially tolerant and progressive. And I think that's what makes him a very appealing and approachable person. And so if he takes these issues that are brought to him as a minority senator and he brings them to the Democrats and kind of, you know, helps pave the way that way in the spirit of collaboration, I think it's fantastic. I think it's fantastic
I gotta
work.
give him credit for one thing I see that he does is, you know, as the lieutenant governor has been facing the legal issues, Will has really kind of corralled some of the Republican senatorial candidates and, I mean, put them under his wing, so to speak. And you see him out there campaigning with these other senators as a group. And, you know, I mean, that race for the legislature, I mean, it's every man for himself. And so I think it's interesting to see him doing, you know, that.
Absolutely. I mean, the Republican Party is poised, and I think pound for pound, we have a good slate. You take our top 5 and the Democrats' top 5, and I think that we outweigh them.
Saw Mars make a face over there.
And he's very generous with his time. I mean, he could very easily just say, hey, you know, to each his own, and, you know, hey, good luck.
Yeah.
But he is corralling them. He's getting them to wave. He's getting them, you know, we've been doing these things, not to sell the store out, but, you know, issues and a lot of forum prep and things. And he has really taken a vested interest in ensuring that these candidates have what I think was lacking when he was running. You know, was the ability, right? What is happening right now, and what are the resources? Where can I go? What agencies can I tap onto for this information? And so he's helping assemble these things so that our new candidates, particularly the ones that aren't necessarily tied into the administration, are able to gain access to this information and be able to speak intelligently on them.
Mars, what do you think of what Kate said?
Which particular part of it?
Agree, disagree?
Yeah, I talked a long
time. I don't know, going back to sort of the different things that she was talking about, what Will's been doing this, and what it means to be sort of an effective legislator, I guess, though. I mean, I've seen a lot of aspirational things, I guess, though, especially dealing with the things dealing with Guam and the Marianas, though. But
yeah.
But personally, I actually kind of like to see things, and there are a lot of issues that could be dealt with relatively quickly, though, just with relatively small bills, though. And that's really what I don't see happening a lot, though, especially with some of the stuff that, and I think part of it's also follow through, just to see whether or not a person's a successful legislator, though, because there are a lot of bills that I see get passed that really you don't see any real impact with afterwards, though. And I'd like to see a lot of, personally, from all the candidates, I'd like to see some more ideas that actually have real impact on everyday things.
Instead of generalities.
Yeah. Which is one of the reasons why, at least with GYP, we were interested in kind of getting specific ideas that people want to accomplish, though. And it's, you know, some people like Lacia, she's got sort of the real property thing that was the main thing, but she also has a lot more to her than that, though, as well. And I was surprised at a lot of Democratic candidates as well, because they had a lot. Some of the people you think are sort of one-dimensional actually have a few more ideas then.
Right, and I think that's interesting with, I've seen it with the Democratic candidates and maybe a couple of the Republican ones, but do you think they're one-trick ponies? Like we had Sabina come on, Sabina Perez, and, you know, we're telling Lategzen, right, obviously you're thinking, oh, military, you know. Mm-hmm. But she was well-versed and had, you know, great ideas about, you know, wide swath of topics, and like that military buildup didn't even come up, and she held her own. So you're right. I think, and that's something I like to see from Lacia. Maybe just advice-wise, stick to your guns on the land use issues. I mean, she does kind of diversify. She's talking about LGBTQ tourism. Hope I got all the letters there.
LGBTQIA plus, I think, yeah. But you know, one of the things you said earlier too, though, about, you know, how many land use senators do we need, though?
Right.
I think it's important that we do have that discussion now, though, because I think it's gone a lot of years without anybody really tackling the issue, and it's a really tough topic for people to really touch on, though, because, I mean, especially when you're dealing with land use, land planning, that determines whose property is valuable and whose property is not valuable.
Yeah, and I think that Tom Atta's kind of been overseeing that for the last few years, and I don't necessarily think that he acts in the interests of the best interests of the public. I think he's kind of really sided a lot more towards businesses and, you know, big landowners. So I mean, you're right. I feel like these issues have kind of fell by the wayside, and then also been neglected, maybe intentionally, by Senator Atta. Doc.
Yeah, you know, I have something I want to say.
Just say it.
I don't know if I should say it or not. You know, and the truth is, I have one of the most boring lives you can imagine. Every year, twice a year, I read the entire Guam Code. I read it, you know, chapter 1 all the way through. And every year, I read every single bill the legislature writes. I read every single resolution the legislature writes. I read every single proposal they discuss. I go through the committee work that they do. And it's mind-numbing, the amount of work that gets actually done at the legislature. And people want to be critical of the legislature. They don't understand the legislature. A legislature is a legislature. A legislature, actually a lot of things go on in the legislature. It's not easy to serve in the Guam legislature. And we have a lot of good people there, particularly on the support side, who do a lot of unseen work, and we rarely give them credit for it.
Right.
And most of the senators, and I've worked with many, many senators over the years, there's only been one or two that I really thought was just no good at all. And one of them was Matt Rector, and because of his shenanigans and things like that. He's one example of one I did not like. But most of them in general, they try to do their best, and they try to serve the people and everything else. But there are one or two over the years that have really set the standard for me on who really want to do their job and serve the people. And one of them I didn't get along with half the time. That was Ben Pangilinan. He always tried to do what was right according to the way he viewed things, and he always tried to serve his constituency. On the Republican side, absolutely, certainly Tony and Pinko. Many, many times did a lot of quiet work, particularly on the quiet leadership side. We have a lot of good leaders here. We have a problem, though. When we went from 21 senators down to 15, we lost the ability to train younger senators because the group was bigger, it was easier to get elected, and people had more time to learn how to really do legislation and how to really do good work. At some point, we've got to decide whether we should go back to 21 or not, because there's a huge amount of work. And if we went back to 21, I think it would have a number of good positive outcomes in that regard. And we should probably talk about that.
That's so interesting, because I figure you would be a smaller government type of guy.
Not for the legislature. And here's why I'm saying this. I just saw, I was just reflecting on this, because I'm back in the conference room. I cut up and I joke all the time about, just different things that go on in the government and things like that. But the reality is, where are anymore? When I first came here, there was Angel Santos in the legislature. Where are the Angel Santoses now? Lassia is running, who serves a very important constituency for our community. It's very difficult for people who have important views but are different views to get themselves elected in this really narrow 15-member group where everybody has to fit within the bell curve, the 66% of what everybody else wants.
Do you feel that it's dumbing down because it's so narrow that the dialogue is just dumbed down? And
and everyone's afraid
people are actually saying less to get elected?
Be different. Everyone's afraid not to have original ideas that they're willing to stick their neck out because it's so the margin to be knocked out of the legislature is so narrow now.
So slim, exactly.
That we don't have, and also it's hurt our ability to encourage younger, newer leaders to constantly move their way up. We've lost that ability. In turn, we've also lost that capacity within the executive branch because the legislature really produces some of our best executive leaders in the government. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, that was more like a quarter.
Just to touch on one of the things that was said, though, I'm not sure necessarily in terms of creating legislators that are, and legislation that's effective in people that know how to draft legislation. I'm not sure maybe increasing it to 21 necessarily would help. One of the things that I would like to see, I think Mary Torres actually mentioned it a few years ago when she was running, is I'd like to see some sort of legislative reference bureau in the legislature. This is something that exists in the FSM, exists in Palau, exists in Hawaii where I used to practice, it exists in a lot of places. And that's essentially where you have an office with people that are trained in law. You could have lawyers doing it, though they often do, that know how to draft laws, that know what happens if you draft a law a certain way, can research the impact of it on other things, can determine whether or not it will be a legal law, to provide that sort of advice to the people that are drafting these laws. And that doesn't really exist with the Guam legislature now.
And then what happens is you get the governor sending bills back down to the legislature with 5 tons of red ink.
In the current Guam Code, I believe there is a Legislative Research Bureau.
It doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist, exactly. On the concept exists on paper, but the implementation, it's an unfunded mandate essentially, or just a feel-good law. Yeah, look, what we're going to do, and they feel good about it, and then they hide that they never implement it. And that's one of the problems we have in our government. We have all these grand ideas that are castles in the sky with no on-the-ground foundation.
But the benefit of something like that is you can have somebody come in who has great ideas, but may not necessarily be a career politician, though, or somebody who's been involved in drafting the law or reading the law for years, but they have somebody that they can go to in order to try to get their bill put into a way that will be effective, that in a way that's presentable, in a way that will actually work to get what they need done, though.
Yeah.
So, I mean, to me, I think it's something that would really be useful on Guam, because I've seen, because you wind up with legislative staffers who have no background in law, drafting these bills that get introduced, and people are trying to change them up at the last minute in order to get them passed. But you wind up with, and this is my perspective as an attorney who has to actually interpret these laws and figure out how to make sure my clients follow these laws correctly. You wind up with a lot of laws that are really poorly worded, that are very difficult to follow. And to me, that's just a main concern that I've had though over the last few years living over there. And one of the main laws that I've heard from a lot of people discussing recently, though, too, which hasn't come out a lot, at least in this election cycle, is with the weighing, the bill over weighing trucks that come out of the port. That is actually a huge problem for business owners right now on Guam. They don't on all sorts of levels, though, in terms of the way that people, because I mean, the thing is, if you get ticketed 3 times for that, you can lose your business license for it. There's no way to actually go into your containers and move things around though before you get weighed, before you come out of the port. Even the way that they're ticketing people though isn't exactly going according to the law. And if you go back to the law itself and try to read the legislative intent for it, it doesn't make any sense. So I mean, this is a pretty important piece of legislation that affects commerce on Guam because it's the amount of things that get imported. But it's a law that's problematic though. But probably could have been better off if we had other people, or if we had some other way of drafting these laws though.
Yeah, I wonder what the legislature's legal counsel been up to. I don't know.
Actually, the problem is especially emergent, especially a big problem after the emergence of the internet, because of all the cutting and pasting that goes on that we have within the legislature, and they don't cut and paste carefully. And so we end up with these monstrosities from the California Code in our little bitty context here that simply doesn't work very well.
Or worse, you wind up with, I've seen legislators take, if you look at Guam's privacy law, there's a portion that's taken from Washington, and the rest of it's taken from the Uniform Penal Code, though. It was actually copied from Hawaii. There's a portion of it that's taken from another state. So if you're trying to figure out how to interpret these pieces of law, you're winding up with these sort of Frankenstein bills that are cut from here, cut from there, cut from there. So you've got to look about 3 or 4 different places to figure out where you're going to interpret these things, though. So
I have a favorite law. I don't know if y'all have ever read it. If you go in the Guam Code, there's a law that requires you to register your hands as deadly weapons.
I like that.
If you've been taught like karate or taekwondo, you have to go to the police station and get your license that your hands are a deadly weapon. You have to pay $5 for it. And I've been so tempted to go down and see if it actually is functional. We need to go through the whole entire Guam Code.
They do that in Hawaii, right?
Yeah, well, the funny thing about that law, though, too, is though that if you register and then you're caught misusing your hands as a deadly weapon, then you suffer an increased penalty, though.
Yes.
But if you never register, then you're not
These
subject
hands,
to the law.
though.
You're criminally liable.
So, I mean, I don't want to seem like I'm ragging on senators, though. I'm just saying.
No. I mean, these are legitimate concerns that I've heard mentioned, and it all, to me, it goes back to, we get this whole crop of senators now. I mean, a lot of them are first timers. A lot of them don't have any legislative experience. And what do you think's going to happen? It then falls on the staffers who are, a lot of times the chiefs of staffs or the staffers have 3, 4, 5 times the experience the senator does, and they're the ones who really do most of the work. A lot of times the senator is just face.
Yeah.
Often they're puppet masters also.
Right.
I mean, that's the reality. I've seen this many, many times.
I have clients that come to me to help interpret the law. It makes sense that people that are writing the laws have their own lawyers to go to in order to make sure that they're writing the laws to express the way that they want the laws to be. So.
And as we get into more of, I'm pretty sure with some of these lawsuits, with the land trust and with the plebiscite, where you have, the legislature's legal counsel focusing on that, maybe things are just falling through the cracks.
It could be, but I think the Legislative Reference Bureau is a little separate from what the Legislative Council is supposed to be doing now. They've got their own separate job that they're doing, but because I know certain legislators have in the past have contracted with private attorneys in order to try to get people to review bills. I think my firm has reviewed bills for people just because they've asked us to do it too. Like our clients have asked us to review bills. Senators have asked us to review bills just to see if we see any problems with them though too. And we're glad to do that, but I mean we can't. We also have to work for our own clients though too.
Right, you've got to make money.
But yeah, it's just one thing that I've noticed that sort of that could be better. And I mean, I have friends that worked in the Legislative Reference Bureau in the FSM though, and if they can do it there with a much smaller budget, I mean, and they can do it in the CNMI with a smaller budget, though I don't see why we can't do it here with the budget that we have.
And there's a whole other angle or aspect that we've never even talked about within our government, and that is to vet or score or try to project the impact of a given law on the entire process or structure. That is, it's the law of unintended consequences. You pass this great idea, and suddenly you end up having these major problems over the scales at the port. You end up having these horrible consequences happen on what should have been a good intent. You know, we want to regulate a little bit better, blah blah blah, and then you end up with these monstrosities. And these are babies that the individual legislators have, and nobody has an ugly baby, and they all want their baby to be, you know, the best baby possible.
I've seen some ugly babies in my time, Doc. Let's talk about our KUAM News UOG student poll. I know you guys have seen it. 371 registered voters polled using telephone or personal interviews.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, and the results congressional, and we'll just go piecemeal. Let's talk about this. Doris Brooks, 33%, St. Nicholas, 63%. Is that surprising at all to you, Kate?
I always say the only poll that matters is on election day.
Yeah. That's got to be the #1 election cliche ever.
No,
Right, yeah.
it's the truth.
Yeah.
I think that the timing of the poll, and don't get me wrong, I respect the work of the students, and I think it's important work. I think it's necessary work that they do. Timing and other various factors can affect the poll.
Right.
And so, if you remember, I think in CT1 or 2, it was showing us, CT1, it was showing us ahead by, you know, a gazillion points.
Right.
And we really only won by 400 plus votes.
Right.
So it depends, and it depends on the mood of the electorate at the time that poll was taken. You know, if there's a certain issue that is associated with this, you know, candidate versus this candidate, it can, you know, but I'm not the expert. You know, maybe the expert should speak about that. But that's how I really feel about it.
Would you say it's this kind of looks like this should have been the poll for the primary between Mike and Madeline.
Sure, I'm not sure when this poll was taken, Doc.
Over the weekend.
Okay.
Right, yeah. And so, what do you think Doris has to do? Because, I mean, according to this poll, it looks like she has some work to do, getting her name out there, maybe.
Doris has been doing a lot in getting out her message and getting her platform out there, and I think that's probably the #1 thing in this sprint to the general. It's 27, 28 days left, and really getting her message out there, and it's a great one. I think that she is poised to be our next congresswoman, and you know, we'll just have to see what happens.
Mars, one thing I noticed with Doris was that she didn't do a lot of, or if any, campaigning in the primary. Do you think that could come back to haunt her?
I think maybe I didn't see a lot of any of it myself though too, but I think Mike kind of got pretty far ahead of her though, and I think Mike kind of surprised a lot of people though too in winning because it was sort of, I mean, I'm not sure if you saw
the freak case.
What?
Almost a freak case.
Yeah, it was weird because I mean, especially with he had that free cotton candy sign out and everything like that, and so I personally didn't take him seriously. So,
hey kids, come get some cotton candy.
Yeah, I wouldn't think that would be the best way to approach this, but I mean, but even just the fact that he was out there, though, I mean, I got that picture text to me like by 3 different people that day, though, at least 3 different groups I was in, though. So I guess to a certain extent, any publicity is good publicity, though, at that point. So, especially with how strange politics is getting nowadays, though, too.
Very.
So, you know, a lot of people were saying that, and I'm sure you heard this, Doc, that a lot of Republicans crossed over and, for whatever reason, voted for St. Nicholas because they felt like he was the weaker candidate. And talking to some insiders, they say that St. Nicholas disagrees, that Mike St. Nicholas feels like the number of votes he got in the primary is his starting point. That's his base.
Sure. Well, first of all, I think we can all agree, and hopefully we all agree, it's not easy to run for office. It's tough. Suddenly it's like a beauty contest. You have to say all the right things at all the right time to all the right people, and then you have to be careful about not turning people off and have them backstab you at the very end and all this other stuff going on. But in terms of crossovers and things like that, the data is pretty empirical. You can look at previous elections and find out how many Republicans voted, you know, generally for the Republican candidates and create a line, and then look at the comparison lines and then look at the crossover numbers. I think a couple of things happened. One, I think that Republicans did jump into definitely, no question, did jump into the gubernatorial race, at least for the Democrats, and were at play there. I think most people would agree with that they were in the gubernatorial race.
It's not so far-fetched.
That then it's now some of them, about 1,000 people, said, I'm not going to mark anybody for delegate and let them fight it out. So that's another factor here. But talk about the twilight zone and me getting taught a lesson. I was taught a major lesson in that delegate race. I still haven't gotten y'all lunch or dinner.
I think part of it too was that Madeline didn't campaign hard enough, and she campaigned I felt like her campaign didn't really start until Mike St. Nicholas's was already well underway.
Yeah, I think that's a part of it. There's a lot of like little pieces when you look at it in retrospect.
Like Amanda Shelton, who was one of her staffers, campaign was also being managed by her chief of staff, and I mean.
Right.
I'm a cook. You can't cook, 2 great dishes at the same time.
Yeah, Amanda's a great lady. I know that quite often that sometimes what can happen is when you're an incumbent, sometimes you feel a little bit more secure than normal.
Yeah.
And by the way, I don't think you can ever find anyone on island who would really say anything negative about Madeline Berdalio. She's absolutely an icon, a political icon, and a social civic icon for our entire island. I think that's an important part of it.
Yeah.
Now, getting back to the point about the poll, anyone who wants to believe they've won an election because of a poll of 371 people, buy yourself a cup of coffee and call yourself a winner. That's as far as you're going to get in an election process. There are 4 long and hard weeks that people have to work, and things are going to change. No candidate of those 3 major offices is going to be under 40. No candidate's going to be over 60. It's going to split out, and it's going to be probably 53-47 or 52-48. It's going to split out, and it can split either way. And everybody has to be careful. And if a person's a front runner, they get arrogant, they think that it's over. What happens is then people are pushed away by them or their followers, and they go to the other camp, and then the tables are turned. That's the danger of believing you've won too early.
What about Attorney General? We had Levin Camacho. 62% of respondents say they think he would be the next elected Attorney General. 33% said Doug Moylan. Kind of consistent with his performance in the primary.
It is. It's consistent. And I think that even watching from the forums, I think Levin is a good kind of, I won't say middle of the road in terms of mediocre. I mean, I think he's a very even-keeled and seems reasonable. I think he seems and he's young and energetic and new. And I think that all this newness is pushing people to say, hey, let's give that guy a chance.
Mars, what did you make of Doug Moylan's recent ad about your passport being safe, which I guess was a dig towards some of the activist cases that Levin has taken on?
I think Doug has to worry more about the weird things he said in the past, though, too. I mean, the whole, was it the Justice Eagle and everything, though? Because he mentioned that during the, what was his name?
Eddie.
Eric
the Eagle. Thank you, Doug. Eric the
I
Eagle.
love Eric the Eagle.
Well, I was a social worker.
It was a great outreach program for kids. I thought that it was, anyway, that's my
I was in
opinion.
social services when Doug Moylan was the Attorney General. That was a very interesting time with Eric the Eagle.
Eric the Eagle and the Eric the Eagle regulations that people were violating by taking the hat off, though. I mean, there were some very strange things that happened during that period of time, though, I think.
And I feel like if Levin wants to go that way, I mean, if Doug is going to, call on Levin's record and some of the cases that he's, lawyered for, I think it goes both ways. I think there's a lot of stuff that Levin can drag out of Doug Moylan's closet, because Doug hasn't really been a candidate in this era of social media where we air out everybody's dirty laundry.
Sure.
But I think
Pretty sure he's got a laundry basket full of dirty clothes.
Yeah, but I think everybody's kind of aware of that too, though. But I don't think Levin needs to do that either, though, too. Because I think he's got his own positions on what he's. I think it's better for him just to focus on what he wants to accomplish.
Right.
Part of the things that I was kind of interested in, though, is the fact that what I've heard from people that aren't lawyers is that a lot of them aren't really aware of what the Attorney General's office does, though.
Yeah.
Aside from, prosecution. So I think that's kind of an issue of what's past attorney generals and what they've done. It's people don't really have a general idea of what that position does, though, and I think you benefit more by just saying, this is something that the attorney general does that should have been going on, though, and this is something that I want to do and bring to this position of the attorney general. So I think being positive would be better for him in this circumstance than being negative.
I think which he has been. I think he's been pretty
Yeah, he
positive.
definitely has. He said he was going to take the high road.
Right, he's going to take the high road on all these things, and he wouldn't make comments or take an opinion.
He wouldn't even comment on Ray Tenorio on the gun grab thing.
No, because he said,
yeah.
I think that's, he has to, he said you just have to look and see what facts unfold. And
then he also mentioned that as an AG, he wouldn't be able to comment on things that were ongoing, which I thought was really classy.
Yes, he said in the future, if I have to be a party to this, I don't want to speak ahead of that.
Right. Doc, let me ask you this, though, with Moylan taking shots at the activism, obviously he's trying to portray himself as the safe pick for whatever reason. And Levin being a younger candidate, if Doug just keeps going at him, is there a point where Levin wants to hit back, even if it's not the best thing to do?
A couple of quick preface points. First, I think we'd all agree Elizabeth Baird Anderson is going to be a really hard act to follow. She's a wonderful AG. She served honorably, very stable, very judicious, no pun intended. I mean, just really a great AG. On the AG's office, here's the key point. I think often we forget this. It's a political office. Yeah. We elect the Attorney General. And so it's going to be rough and tumble politics regardless, whether people know about it or not. And so get over it. I mean, we're not electing a judge to go and serve as the Attorney General, and we had a great judge serve as an Attorney General. That office is a political office, and the person serving in that office is a political person, whether they want to admit it or not. Nonpartisan, but they're still political. And they have to cover their political selves throughout the conduct of that office. That's one limitation of having a multi-term Attorney General system. I think we should have a one-term Attorney General. You cycle in, you cycle out, so then you don't have to worry about stepping on anybody's toes. And I'm kind of radical about that too.
I just don't think there's enough lawyers to cover that, though. You wind up with a lot of people just switching in and out of the AG's office, though.
Okay, let's get to the real juice of it. The race for governor. Big lead here for Lulian Guerrero, 65%, Ray Tenorio, 30%, other 5%. And that's got to be a kind of a nod to the write-in effort, I'm pretty sure. Which is kind of consistent, you were saying. 5%, that's usually right around where write-ins
about 5% of people will attrit their own vote. That is not use their vote for that kind of office.
Right.
And sometimes they'll mark both bubbles and then tell each candidate, oh, I swear to God I voted for you, and then they'll have voted for both. So we see that behavior a little bit too. That's part of the other.
Right.
Are the people who vote for both.
So, Kate, let's talk about this poll. And in the conference room before the show, I told you that I felt like Tenorio Ada is beginning a surge. I feel like the two ads that they came out with Lou, which weren't third-party assassin hit jobs, they both took the campaign, took ownership of these ads, and I felt they were very powerful in that they not only created a dialogue, but shifted a lot of focus away from whatever was going on with the LT and the court case.
I think that the campaign has done a really good job of compare and contrast, and it doesn't necessarily have to be positive or negative. It's comparing and contrasting the two, and I think they did a really good job. And it's all factual. It's all fact-based. There isn't anything in there that is untrue.
Right.
And we've really begun to see, as you said, it's more of a tidal wave of support, even from the other Democrat camps, who have not joined the other camps or the writing.
Wouldn't quite call it a tidal wave.
Well, I don't know. You were in an agate last night, so there's a very quiet, bubbling surfacing of support, and don't count us out, because it's definitely, like you said, the momentum has shifted. I think that a lot of what we're doing now is more issues based, talking about the things that they have planned, versus all the juicy stuff that.
No, I mean with this gun grab thing, when it reached, it was just everywhere. I was the guy who was saying, don't write off, not even necessarily the LT Ray Tenorio, but the people who were doing the campaign. I mean, this isn't their first rodeo. It's probably like their 20th rodeo. They know how to pace a campaign, and what they've done with these two ads is something that we didn't see in the primary, which is Lulian Guerrero on the defensive. I mean, she's fighting, moving backwards, and I think that was, for what it's worth, whatever side you're on, you have to give credit to just that, Mars.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of, obviously this was planned, I mean, in my,
Right.
my mind at least, though, because it just happened to come out this happened years ago, though.
Right.
So it just happened that this political ad came out this week, or last week, the same week that the lieutenant governor was supposed to go to court.
It's one of those things they had in their pocket for that time. Okay, let's drop this now.
Yeah, and it worked because then they got, Lulian Guerrero talking about it, though, too. So
Right.
it just kind of plays into it, though. So it shifts the narrative away from that, which is unfortunate, I think, though. But it's, like you said, though, it's sort of like clearly, it seems like these people, the people that are involved, this isn't the first rodeo, so they know
Right.
what they're doing. But personally, as a voter, though, I don't like being manipulated in that sense, especially when it seems like it's that clearly staged.
It seems pretty clear. But, I mean, that doesn't mean it's not a legitimate
Well, I'm
point
saying,
to bring up.
I think that Ray and Tony, it's not their first rodeo.
Yeah.
I think that they have been in public office a really long time. They've been public servants a long time. And this one singular event is not going to
Make or break.
make or break. I think people know Ray Tenorio. They know him from the days of No Empty Promises and Just Hard Work. The top vote getter, the guy who will, go to any length to serve. And so I think that will I think that's still a resounding message throughout, and it's a positive one. And I think that Ray and Tony have done a really good job. I think they have great plans ahead. GUMA 2000, the affordable homes, the what's already started with the tuition-free college, and a lot of other great things that are happening. So, in my mind, people forget that, and I don't mean this in a manipulative way, as Mars was saying, but I think that people have short-term memory.
Yeah.
I think that we're a really forgiving society, and I think people see this for what it is, and it was politically motivated, and hopefully, and again, who knows? The only poll that matters is on general election day.
Second time we heard that today.
It's the truth.
Right. No, but I think it really, Doc, it's coming down to me at this point. I love to see attack ads. I just, I'm a political junkie. I love to figure out the strategy, and I see where the Balta team is going, and I think it's working, and I think that for Ray Tenorio to still be a viable candidate with this gun grab thing, and I mean people have just beat this thing. What's after beating it to death and beyond?
The dead horse.
In my opinion,
Beat
the only
dead
poll
horse.
that matters is on election day.
Oh,
but anyway,
not
now I got to tell you,
I feel a meme
he's a
coming.
viable candidate 100% right now.
Right.
There's no question. There are
Yeah.
two candidates on the ballot that are going to be on the ballot that people are going to mark their bubbles for in a month from now, and that's the reality.
Yeah.
And there's no getting around that, and people need to understand that.
I meant viable candidate like this. He could still win.
Yes,
I mean, there's,
absolutely.
Totally.
No doubt.
Absolutely.
And so many people are like, "Oh, there's no way," and I'm just like, "No, I feel like
No,
that they're-
there's
it's even
definitely
right now.
no.
People, that's a very dangerous thought if people
Yeah.
have that, because then they stop working hard for their own
Yeah.
candidate they want
Yeah.
to win.
Right.
They need to be aware of that. Now, really quickly, there's a couple of points I wanted to quickly make. First, Chris, you have totally transformed yourself. You have intellect and acumen in politics. I just want to point that out.
Mm-hmm.
I've been very impressed with you in the last several months in talking politics with you. You've got a great angle on this business, and I've been very impressed.
Thanks.
Talking about attack ads aren't the most effective ads on Guam.
Right.
They're parody ads,
Yeah.
ads that make fun of people, and those are the most effective negative ads. Not the cold hard facts.
Right.
That's not the ad that really works. On the other hand, there's a couple other quick points. It is hard, very hard, for male candidates to run against female candidates in these kinds of races. And the male candidate has to be very, very careful running against female candidates.
Right.
It's like a very, very narrow line.
Sure.
And even the most innocuous mistakes can come back and get you. So you got to be really careful. If you're going to do attack ads or you're going to do these negative ads, you got to be really, really careful when you do them and in those kinds of terms. It's very, very important.
So are you saying that Ray should employ more humor in his,
Every
his
candidate,
attacks,
every
so to
candidate,
speak,
not
yeah.
just attacks,
Right.
but messaging.
Yeah.
Not just the negatives, the positives.
Right.
You know, everybody who's watching us now or listening to us, everybody who's right here has made a mistake in their lives, and we've all also had successes. Owning up to our mistakes is pretty tough sometimes. Now, I got to tell you, there are some mistakes we can't forgive people for. I understand that. The only question is, will this particular set of mistakes that everyone's talking about, and on both sides, whether it's Ray's mistakes or Lou's mistakes or anybody else's mistakes, which one in the balance is going to end up prevailing in the end? The ones that end up making angles for candidates, or the thing you mentioned, your friends sent you the cotton candy photos. Why did they do that? They thought it was funny.
Yeah.
They thought that it was humorous, and so that created a shareability item.
Right.
We're in this modern shift. Why do videos go viral? Why do we send people these jokes we get on the internet? This is all very different behavior that we're not used to. You know, I grew up first programming computers with punch cards that I had a number just in case I dropped the box and the pages went all over the place.
I grew up with computers having two colors, green and black, on the screen right now.
Same thing. This is a very different environment. Everywhere you turn now, there's video being taken of things. There's recordings. There's pictures being taken of things. We're in a very, very different social and cultural environment right now, particularly for political candidates.
I think what I was trying to say earlier is at this point, I feel like Ray, I mean, even with all this stuff going on, is really showing that he, at this point, wants it more. I mean, you know, he was at the Agana precinct getting processed, and in our interview, he kind of did this thing where he deflected answering the question, but his answer was that, you know, I'm here for the foster children, I'm here for the unborn, I'm here for everybody who's struggling. So, I mean, even in the position he's in, right? I mean, getting caught by the media outside the police station, he's still taking that opportunity, which is very high profile, to take some shots at his opponent. And to me, that just shows that, I mean, you know, he's hungry. I don't know how hungry Luli Aguero is.
I think both candidate teams want to win, 100%. I think both are quite anxious and quite worried at this point, you know, regardless of what their poll numbers say or whatever.
Right.
I think, in fact, all the candidates throughout these races, it's hard to run for office.
Yeah.
You know, it is literally a beauty contest. It's really tough, and it's something I while we get to talk about it, talking about it and actually doing it are it's two different levels of courage. It's a gladiatorial, we call it gladiatorial efforts that you have to do when you run for office, meaning you've got to be on your game. And it's tough. It's not easy. If it were easy, everybody would do it.
Everyone
So
would
let
do
me
it.
ask you this,
Yeah.
Doc, and let's do a little role reversal here. What do you think Lou needs to do to maintain this lead and move to victory in the general?
Not make mistakes, not make people angry, not make people want to turn around and then go to the other camp and then, like a virus, pull a whole bunch of other people with them, which happens constantly in Guam politics. You say just the wrong person, a wrong thing to the wrong person at the wrong time, then you end up seeing this major shift. I call it in Guam politics just like the weekend opinion cascade. The last weekend, just the weirdest stuff causes a whole bunch of people to shift their opinion and vote one way or over the
I
other.
remember that ad Tom Addis' father-in-law came out against him, and that was another one of those like, whoa.
I don't know if I should say it on the air,
Yeah.
the title of the ad, but it was the Isla, you know, whatever
drums,
ad.
yeah.
Isla Love, whatever.
Yeah,
I know the
yeah.
word, I just want to say it.
Yeah.
Very, very damaging. And it was unfortunate because, you know, neither of the two on the candidate team actually had endorsed or would ever say anything like that. And that was just very unfortunate.
Yeah.
But again,
So Lou can't make mistakes. So how do you think this whole Frank Ogden? I know how you feel about Ken Leon Guerrero, but
sure.
Frank Ogden and the party not being united, and this push that people are making for Frank's supporters to write Frank in. I mean, how can Lou win with that chunk, presumably being removed from the equation?
Sure. Frank Uggan, I've known him for the last 22 years. He's an honorable gentleman. I think that sooner or later there's going to be some thought and consideration in the next 2 to 4 weeks. And I think that things will be different a month from now when we're here on election night. In general, there's very, very little utility that comes from a write-in candidacy, in my opinion. But you never know why people are doing it.
It's kind of a different era we're living in, too. I feel like anything can happen. I mean, this election is really a lot of head scratchers, this election. And
We were just discussing that in the conference room.
Right.
This is unlike any election season we've ever experienced.
can you imagine what next election is
Yeah.
going to be like? It's gonna be crazy. Mars,
Well,
I
it'll
know
be
you're-
midterm, so.
Yeah. I know you're not the biggest Ray Tenorio fan, so let me ask you.
Oh.
Ray in this poll trailing by 35 points. What does the lieutenant governor need to do to close the gap and win in November?
I actually kind of like Ray Tenorio. As a person, I like him. No, but it's
Right.
what does he need to do? I think they're doing it though. It's sort of like you said. He was standing outside the probation office talking about the other candidate though, and shifting the
Right.
focus on to them. And so I think the more Lulian Guerrero keeps talking about what Ray Tenorio wants her to talk about and less about what she wants to talk about, then the better it is for Ray. So that's kind of the way politics works though. So
Yeah.
but yeah, I think that's kind of it. I mean, it's whoever controls the narrative, I think, winds up talking about what they want to talk about the most. So I
Kate,
think that's it.
what does Lou need to do to maintain her lead?
It's hers to lose
Yeah. I
because
agree.
relatively unscathed thus far. There have been, and truthfully, from a Republican standpoint, she's kind of it's been a straight path up till now. So, I guess if she stays the course, it could come out well for her.
I wonder though, with like her lack of experience at this level, I mean, is she mentally prepared to be dealing with? I mean, those were 2 attacks, and those were 2 attacks early. I mean, that was kind of early, right? So knowing the Republicans and knowing the people who, and they're my friends who run, the Baltazar campaign,
Mm-hmm.
I know that's not it. There's got to be 3 other shoes that are going to drop, and how does Lou keep moving forward without having to deflect and respond to these ads? And
Well, I think with any candidate, I mean, stay focused on what you're going to do and on your plan, and don't worry about what everyone else is doing or saying.
so
You
hard.
know, it is hard.
So easy
Oh,
to
you're
say.
telling us.
Yeah.
I'm a Republican, and so
Right.
as much as all the things floating around in the stratosphere, Republicans have really had to operate in that environment, and are doing fantastic at it. I mean, just really soldiering on and fostering through and saying, look, we realize this is happening, we're acknowledging it, but we're not going to stand down from it. We're not going to let this break us. We're going to keep on going. We've not let the people of Guam down before, as Lieutenant Governor said, and I'm not about to start now. I've always been there, and I'm still here. I'm not going anywhere. So this is what I have to offer, and I'm still here for you. And he's absolutely, as Ron said, absolutely poised to win this, and I believe so.
That wasn't my question. So what about Doc? You got something to say?
Just want to say 2 quick things.
Yeah.
First, Lulian Guerrero, CEO of a major corporation here on
Right.
Guam.
Yeah.
She's done, I think, a lot harder things than this kind of election. That's
Sure.
the first point. Second point, in any election anywhere, particularly this election, you run unopposed or you run scared. There is no in between. I mean, everybody in these races have a lot to be scared about, and they need to understand that and not take anything for granted.
Yeah, I mean, Ray's got the court case, but if you look over on the Democrat side, I mean, they've got a major fracture in their party, and it's not, Lou warring with some 2-bit. I mean, it's pretty open warfare
It's
with
two
the
formidable
guy
people.
that
Sure.
she beat by 200 some votes. So
Right.
I mean, I was saying on a podcast today, in some ways, I'm pretty sure Lou wishes she, had the gun grab thing as opposed to dealing with, the guy you barely beat in the primary, gunning for you in the general. It's just crazy. So they have their share of problems too.
Sure.
Yeah.
So you have a gun grab on the one hand and a vote grab on the other hand. I mean, that's the
A lot of
question.
grabbing.
Right, yeah. It's tough.
But it sure makes it interesting, and
It has.
It makes for great after-party talk also.
I love it.
And everybody at home is talking about these same things all the time.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
sure.
this is just part of the fun.
I mean, we had a
Absolutely.
30-minute podcast that stretched into an hour and a half this afternoon, just on the gubernatorial race alone and the direction it's taking, and there's just a lot of I think those two vote ads really put out a lot of interesting issues, compare and contrast. Obviously, Lou being very wealthy. I mean, that's something that everyone was talking about. Since she was running, and I felt I was pretty ballsy of the Balta campaign to kind of just put it out there. And I didn't agree that with their assessment of rates in Oregon being